Warning. This program contains strong language, auditory violence, and mental nudity. It is intended only for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to your uncensored home for World of Warcraft news and opinions. With your host, Berzerker, this is Unshackled Fury.
The time has come. Dragonflight is at our doorstep. And for the first time ever, this show has an audience with one of the Warcraft gods. So welcome back to your uncensored home for World of Warcraft news and opinions, Unshackled Fury. I'm your host, Berzerker. This is episode 117. And on today's show, hear my first-hand account of our participation in a group interview with the Watcher himself, World of Warcraft game director Ian Hazzikostas. How it all came together, what revelations came forth, and what it was like to be part of an interview of that magnitude. In addition, my experiences with Phase 2 of the Dragonflight pre-patch, and if this is finally the time for me to level some alts. But first, if you haven't paid attention, and I mean, I can already tell you, this is going to be a long episode. We're going to go through this interview here that I was a part of. I'm going to go through all of that. It's going to take a little while to read everything, so I'm just going to tell you up front, buckle up, and we're going to hit that first because I think that's the thing that people are most interested in. There's no Let's Rage portion of the show today because frankly it's just gonna take too long. And why is there rage when, we got to do one of the coolest things, if not the coolest thing we've ever gotten to do as part of this show? So if by any chance there's some new listeners here, welcome. Happy to have you on board. Hopefully you hear something you like and stick around, and maybe you'll hear something new that you didn't see on any of the other readouts or here on any of the other shows, because I do think that there is still some meat on the bone. I'll get to kind of the layout of how everything happened and how everything has happened since with the interview, but there are, I believe, a couple of things that are maybe going underreported, and certainly one that I think everybody seems to have missed at this point. So listen, if you're listening to this show, you're getting the straight scoop, and that's just how it goes. I've always played it straight. I've always tried to deal with everything as honestly and openly as I can. You, my dear listeners, you get to come along on the ride as openly as I can describe it and relive it and retell it. And I was working on an impression of Ian, and it's not very good because, quite frankly, he just has another white guy voice. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's just, he doesn't have any kind of crazy accent. He doesn't really have anything other than he just talks really fast. So for those that I may have promised an impression, I'm sorry. I'll do my best to try to maybe modulate my voice here as I go through these answers. But it's pretty much going to be straight. This is also going to be the last episode before the launch of Dragonflight. I'm not planning on doing any sort of special edition Dragonflight launch episode or anything like that. You never know. Maybe something will pop up and like, okay, we're gonna do this. But for now, this is the final one before we launch into the Dragon Isles and see what that is all about. So, with all of that said, let's go ahead and jump into our news and hit that interview. So before we get to where we're going, we have to talk about where we've been. Let's go back briefly to the end of last year when I announced that I would be joining up with what was then Warcraft Radio. It is now Bonus Roll Productions. And what I said at the time was that I felt like I could not progress any further into podcasting in terms of bringing you exclusives or other items. I had reached the limit, the plateau of what I could do on my own, and I felt like that was the right time to make a shift, to make a change, and to switch over to, quite frankly, the only organization that I felt was the right fit, and also, to be fair, had some pull. It was able to make good on some of the things that I was hoping to do. So, full faith and credit to Bonus Roll for hooking me up with this interview. When the last episode of this show posted, I had no idea that this was going to be something that was happening. I had no idea, and it wasn't until a few days before when Ketra over at Bonus Roll reached out to me and said, "Hey, Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., you think you can make that a free window?" And I'd be lying if I said that my spidey sense was tingling and going, uh-oh, I think I know what this is. I think this might be something big. And sure enough, she let me know that Blizzard had reached out and they had offered up a slot on this group interview with Ian Hazzikostas himself, and they were giving me a shot. So, of course, I said yes. Maybe there was a boo-boo appointment on my calendar. I don't know. It worked. Maybe. But that's how it goes. You got to make room for things like this. So just want to say here, once again, a huge thank you to the folks at Bonus Roll, particularly Ketra, who have made this happen. I said before when I had done the Heroic Dragonflight edition giveaways that those, were some of the biggest things I'd ever been able to do. This is now, by far and away, the biggest thing I've ever done on this podcast. You go back 7 years when I first started this. And this was, quite frankly, pretty much the top of the mountain of what I wanted to achieve. To prove that somebody from the community who had no training, no background, no connections, no resources, no nothing, could find a way to make this happen. And it did take the connection with Bonus Roll to finally make that happen. And so credit to them for making the dream come true. But here we are. And so come Wednesday, this past Wednesday, I found out that it was going to be myself. It was going to be Manny from For Azeroth, also from the Bonus Roll family here, and Raider IO. I didn't know it was Hula Hoops from Raider IO, but that's who conducted the interview. And worked with Blizzard, got the invite. I did preliminarily put up a tweet. Some of you saw it on the Unshackled Fury Twitter account asking, hey, if you got a chance to interview somebody way up on high, what would you ask them? And then I was politely asked to take that down. So for future reference, anybody that's listening, Blizzard PR does not want you to crowdsource your questions, although for some reason I saw MMO Champion doing it, and I'm pretty sure I saw Also Breezy doing it, and a few other people, but hey, you know what? Lessons learned. So just hot tip for all of you out there. But sure enough, got the invite, had my questions ready. Manny and I had kind of looked at some questions on a sheet together, and then submitted everything because they did ask to see some stuff ahead of time for, as they claim, to give Ian a chance to research anything that needed to be researched for a more comprehensive answer. I think that's fine, understanding that perhaps that is a measure of control to make sure that nobody goes sideways, but we're, I think, pretty friendly actors in this. We're not Polygon. We're not, one of these other news outlets. We're not Kotaku. We're not Jason Schreier. we're fan podcasts. We're part of that inner circle of the community. So it's all going to be pretty friendly, and it was totally fine. So we did that. Came time. We jumped in, and sure enough, there was the man himself. There was Ian, the man I have always said one of my dream interviews would just be to get some time one-on-one, to stare into his dreamy eyes and ask him questions. And in a way, I got to do that. But to be honest with you, it was pretty surreal, even in this group interview format, which now there's been some questions. So here's sort of the clarification about what that group interview is, what that means, and why you're hearing me talk about this as opposed to playing anything, and why you haven't heard or seen anything about this group interview in terms of audio or video. Reason being is that because there are multiple entities involved on the call, so to speak, they want to make sure there's no issues with anyone being on anyone else's show or podcast or whatever without their permission or anything like that. So to avoid any sort of conflict of that nature, we can have a recording of it for our own purposes for note taking, but we cannot play anything. So that's what this sort of group interview is. And so if you look at, on Wowhead right now, there's 50 fucking interviews that they've done, and it's all group interview. There's no audio or video. Some of them I know, So Breezy got I think the Professions one, and that was a one-on-one, and there's been a couple of others where they have had that video, that audio video, but for the group interviews, they don't do those. So you'll see that all out in written form. And that is what essentially leads us here, where you've now had a couple of different ways in which this information is coming out. But on this show, because I got the chance to do it, I want to try to give you as much of a full retelling of my part of this as I can on this podcast. So I'm going to read to you. I went through the video because I have the actual video of the whole thing. So I'll always have that in my personal collection if I want to go back and see Ian and my wonderful rapport. I can always go back and look at that. But I went through. I have the transcript of, this is about 99% on of what I asked and said, and then Ian's responses, with some, they always say lightly edited for clarity. It's some of that. But I'm going to try to keep this as close to what it was as possible, because there are a couple of, I think, newsworthy items that came out of this just in terms of their philosophy. And quite frankly, he told us what the next patch is going to be, which I don't think anybody has picked up on this or has seen this anywhere. And it's some huge thing, but I thought it was noteworthy, at least. So you're going to hear that as part of his answer, along with the question that I always promised I would ask him if I got the chance. So we got in. The three of us got a chance to answer questions. It was kind of a bit of a fight for time between all of us to make sure that we got in what we wanted to. I don't think you ever walk away from the situation where if you only have an hour and you're having to share it with other people, you're never going to be able to ask what you wanted. I wanted to ask questions about like artifacts, not artifacts, but legendaries, and that never saw the light of day. I had other questions that, of course, I had to just completely let go of. I'm literally looking at my list of questions and deciding almost up until the last second which questions I was going to ask and where that was going to go. A little bit chaotic on the front end, but here now, I'm going to read you through my comments and questions, Ian's responses, and then sort of my thoughts on each one as we go. So this is going to take a little bit of time, so buckle up, get comfy, or get on a long walk, or start a long drive, or do whatever you're going to do, or if you're actually somebody taking notes for a news site, welcome. Glad to have you. Hopefully this is as painless as possible, and it should match a lot of what you've seen on the Bonus Roll website. There is a transcript that is up, but it is not 100%, and there's a couple of things in there that I wanted to make sure I got to, that I want to add from the interview, including a great question from Hula Hoops that mirrored another question that I wanted to ask, so I was glad that she ended up asking it, kind of sneaking it in at the end. And same with Manny. Manny had a good question right at the very end as we were out of time. but it related to the one question that I always wanted to ask, and I thought it was a great finish to the whole thing. So here we go. First question that I got a chance to ask Ian was, I said, "Good morning, Ian. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate you coming and talking with us. Gonna shift gears just a little bit." They've been talking about some Mythic Plus and Raid stuff. Talk more about the human side, maybe development philosophy and those kinds of things. Obviously, early in Shadowlands, in that early part of 2020, during that development cycle, right, the whole world changed, and suddenly everybody and their mother had to figure out, how are we going to keep this thing moving, regardless of whatever business that you are in. And obviously, you folks had to do an enormous amount of work to continue what you were doing, get Shadowlands out, continue developing, working on Dragonflight, and all the things going on. So now that we've had some time, and I guess in the new normal of the COVID era, are there any challenges or lessons from the Shadowlands development that you can share with us as they relate to how your team has adapted and what that might mean moving forward with development further into Dragonflight and beyond? And Ian responded with, "It's a great question," which, a quick aside here, huge ego boost that he thought this was a great question, so hooray. It's a great question. It's something that we've grappled with for really 2.5 years continuously now. We finished Shadowlands. We basically made the entirety of Dragonflight in a hybrid, primarily remote environment. There are a couple of hundred folks back in the office on any given day these days. A lot of people come in 3 days a week and work from home Mondays and Fridays. There are others who are fully remote, others who are 1,000 miles away or on different time zones. And that's how things work now. There's an empowering flexibility to it, but also some challenges that we've had to overcome. Shifting to virtual meetings, I think quickly we realized that actually it was superior for a handful of things. For certainly large meetings, you have to worry about fitting everybody into a giant conference room, but also things like art reviews. You didn't have somebody in the back of the room squinting to see what was on a projector. People could actually do markups or paint overs on a shared screen. Everybody got the sort of front row seat for that collaboration. And I think we all quickly realized that for those types of things we're doing, or for example, when we're reviewing our like zone building or world building, outdoor environments, things like that, we could all, while looking at it, while in a meeting with someone explaining what we were seeing, hop in clients and jump into a test server and actually be running around the world navigating ourselves while we're being presented, what someone has just finished working on. That's far superior, again, to just sitting around a conference room somewhere. And we all quickly decided we're going to keep doing this forever. Even if we're all back in the office tomorrow, we're still going to run these meetings virtually. I think the things that you lose, obviously, there's just the casual social interactions. Let's say, let's go grab lunch together, things like that, make work inherently more social, more connected, more fun. It's also the freeform collaboration, freeform brainstorming. I think through tools like Zoom and Slack and otherwise, we still have great meetings and great planned collaborations. The thing that we've had to work to recreate is the case where someone swings by someone's desk to bounce an idea off of them, walks them through some things they're thinking, and someone sitting like 8 feet away doing something else overhears the conversation, has a spark of inspiration, turns around and is like, cool, but what if we did whatever? Suddenly, we're off to the races in a totally new direction, and that was not a planned interaction. It was not a meeting. That was not like you wouldn't have pulled that third person in necessarily, but that's how it happened to play out, and that isn't possible when, things are pre-scheduled, pre-planned. But we've worked to create hangout channels and chat channels in place and encourage people, rather than private messaging each other, to blast their questions out or throw suggestions out for people to chew on in their own time, to allow others to chime in who aren't necessarily the direct recipient of the message. And it's just like building new processes and building new muscle memory for how we do that. Overall, it's new, it's different, but it's exciting. And I don't think we have been, this year, limited or held back by the circumstances and what we're able to do and the creativity that the team is able to muster and unleash. I couldn't be more proud of Dragonflight and how it's all come together. And I can't wait for millions of folks to jump in and experience what we've made in a couple of weeks. So, complete answers are something that I have to give Ian a lot of credit for. He gives very complete answers to just about every question. If you go through and look at the readouts, you'll see that. And my follow-up question to this, you'll see that it was kind of a leading question in a way, but really, I wanted to find out more about where they're at in terms of settling down, because, like a lot of folks, the COVID era has disrupted many things, and when you're having to do work in real time to get products out that people are waiting for, I think it's really hard when you have to uproot and try something completely different. Now, this is a tech company. You think that they have pretty good systems in place or are able to be nimble about what they do. So it was great to hear sort of his version of how they're trying to recreate that spark of inspiration moment like he talks about, or trying to now have these meetings virtually where you've seen improvements now. You've seen different ways that people can interact. And so it was really great to hear that. I enjoyed kind of his retelling of how they've sort of been able to recreate that. But there was, like I said, there was certainly a motive, because it was the follow-up question here that I had for him that really, I think, really set it up. And also where I think we were able to get a little bit of a scoop here. Not huge, but it's the first time I've ever heard this. So I followed up with, absolutely, thank you, a very complete answer, and I appreciate that. Obviously, there's been concern amongst the community that, when they saw, it's going to come out in 22, there's no way, that's not possible, there's just no way. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that behind the curtain, we have no idea. It's your business, you're running it, you have an idea, you have timelines up on the wall, we have no idea what they are. And so we're just kind of left to guess based on past history. So I appreciate hearing the sort of modernization of the business model and trying to figure those things out. Maybe you can give us an idea too, here it goes, based on those things is we're always looking at like patch cadence, right? And what it's going to look like. Is anything going to be faster or slower? Is any of that affected by the new way in which you telework or hybrid or whatever it is? Any of that affected at all? Because I think some people were expecting something big yesterday during the stream, right or wrong, so there's some curiosity. And what I meant by that stream, that was the one where they had a bunch of people come out and they showed the new cinematic and all that stuff. And I know at least it's in Taliesin and Evatel on that weekly reset show. They're like, this could be it. Everybody's looking at the Legion announcement, 7.1 announcement, as something that may have happened there. And, Ian, he picked up on that. So here's how we responded to that. So, I mean, obviously, we have a bunch of stuff we're working on. I think we also don't want to get ahead of ourselves and our announcements. I remember we announced patch 7.1 for Legion before Legion came out. And it was kind of weird, actually. At the time, we wanted to get the information out there and really make the point that we have a lot of content coming your way. But also people were like, wait, you're like, what? Karazhan, like the game isn't even out yet. What are you guys doing? All in due time. Let's let people experience this chapter in the coming weeks. We have a lot of stuff right around the corner. We know, if we're loud and clear and deeply understand that World of Warcraft is not just about the expansion we launch, it's about how we maintain it. The legacy of an expansion is all about its content and how it played out. So many expansions that we have seen as having a strong start, but then petered out because of a lack of content for long stretches of time. I know that obviously Shadowlands systems were not perfect by any means. With the long gap waiting for Chains of Domination update, the long duration of that first year was brutal. It was brutal for players, brutal for communities. We know we can't repeat that. So I think thinking about what the next year, what the next cycle for this expansion looks like, we want to make sure that our seasons, our raid tiers, are not overly long. I think 5-ish months, 5 to 6 months is a reasonable time. Once you start to get past that, people get restless. People are done. Either they've accomplished their goals or they've decided that they're not going to accomplish their goals and they're ready for something new. That was actually part of our thinking, and we had a sense of when Dragonflight was going to come out. That was part of our thinking and planning and releasing Season 4 when we did. When we first announced it, people were like, you're cutting the season too short. This is too fast. But actually, by the time it came out in August, that was 5 months of season 3. I think people were ready to move on, and I think it was nice to have a change of pace and something fresh for 2.5 months or so to wrap things up. The other piece, though, aside from those big chunks of content, from zones, dungeon seasons, PvP seasons, raids, is what's happening in the middle and what's coming in between. Can we update our story? Can we add depth to the world? Can we add replayable events and new features that ask you to revisit old content? I think we learned a lot from patch 9.1.5 that didn't have a ton of new content in it, but really kind of freshened up a lot of existing systems and what people were doing in the middle of the season. So we want to do more of that. We want to actually release something smaller, more frequent patches in between our major tentpoles of a 10.1 or 10.2, etc. And this, to me, this is the biggest part of this whole thing, this whole interview for me. But at the end of the day, a lot of words. We know that proof is in the pudding and actual actions, and so we don't want to talk too much about it until we just do it. But we have a big 2023 planned, and you'll be hearing more about the next small patch coming after 10.02 in the very near future. 10.02. As far as I know, I haven't seen anything anywhere from Blizzard or anywhere else about the next patch being some sort of small content patch, 10.02, after launch. So there's at least one of your exclusives. I didn't see that in any of the write-ups. I haven't heard anyone talk about that. I haven't seen that anywhere. But that was part of what I was hoping to find out when I was asking Ian these questions, is with the shift to hybrid, telework, all the stuff that's happened, our concern about patch cadence and the expansion being rushed and all this kind of stuff. Overall, through those two questions and his answers, it feels like to me that they are very confident in the pace that they are now at. Everything has stabilized in terms of where people are. The unrest that has happened with the company, the lawsuits, litigation, the harassment suits, all that stuff, that's still going on in the background, and there's still a labor movement that is ongoing. But in speaking with him and watching him as he's answering these questions, because for me, it makes a big difference to be able to see somebody while they're talking and saying all this stuff, as opposed to providing something that's written. Just watching his body language, kind of how he responded to all this stuff, everything, number one, appears very genuine. But number two, it feels like things have stabilized in that way, and they are going to be able to get content out more regularly than what we saw in Shadowlands. So one, I think for me personally, I think I was able to squeeze a little bit of new news out of him, getting that 10.02 being mentioned, that we're going to hear about this soon, that 2023, I don't think he's going to say that they've got big plans if they don't have big plans. So there you go. There you go, news sites. 10.02, courtesy of Berzerker, Shackled Fury. And then maybe it doesn't come to pass, and then then I'll eat shit. But I was very heartened to hear what he had to say about the smaller patches, kind of having that cadence where it's not just these big, long waits, which it's nice to hear him say that their intended goal for these seasons, for these long patch cycle, right? Like the major 10.1 to 10.2, let's say, should be about 5 to 6 months. So I think we can use that. That's Ian's own words, right? So I think we can use that as a benchmark, because even amongst ourselves, sometimes I feel like we guess, we have an idea, but we don't really know. Well, here you go. From the horse's mouth, 5 to 6 months on those major ones. But now, getting the sense that there will be these smaller, perhaps story-related patches or other systems, or like you said, replayable content, maybe something smaller but fun, something that makes you want to come back, as opposed to just gobbling everything up at the launch of a patch and then, all right, I'm good, I'm out. So I love hearing that, one, because I want to get my money's worth out of my year-long subscription that I paid for, but two, that they're having that change in philosophy where it doesn't have to be these huge dumps of new items at one time, new quests, new storylines, whatever, all at once that you just rush through, that they're going to kind of part and parcel them out a little bit. So there you go. Coming out of that, big 2023 plan and we're going to be hearing about patch 10.02 here in the future. So that was the first two, and then the third question I have for him here, that was sort of the first bulk within the interview where I was able to ask questions, because we kind of took turns and asked a few questions each. And so the third question that I had for him in sort of the first of the two sort of chunks of time that I had with him is, I responded with that last one saying, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. And one more, if you'll indulge me here. On a more positive note, I think there's been a lot of uplift recently with Dragonflight. I think everybody, at least in the community, we really feel that alongside recent comments about how this is sort of the third age of World of Warcraft and these themes of returning and rebirth and renewal. And there's a very meta belief amongst the community that this isn't just about the players. And this isn't just necessarily the characters in the game, but it's also the development team. So one of the things that we've, I think, become more acutely aware of in recent years is that there are human beings who make this stuff, and that there's real people involved, and we should care about them and what happens to them in their lives, and, really try to support them better. Does your team also feel this sense of rejuvenation, renewal, uplift? And then for yourself, do you also feel that sort of vibe that's coming in, or is this just another day at the office for Ian? I said, this is definitely not another day at the office or week at the office. This is an awesome month. This month, it's been a long time in the making. The team is excited. The team is just so full of passion and joy for what we've made together. I can't wait to share it with the world. It's been a tough couple of years on a lot of levels, and I think this one really is a labor of love. I know that phrase is thrown around a lot. This one truly is. And I think it was meant to be a breath of fresh air in its conception. It's just open, joyous, about exploration, about going to new lands, and positivity, and uplifting all around. After the time we spent in the realm of death, let's come back to Azeroth as new life comes to the world. And it's going to be an awesome journey. And I can't wait, right? For across the team these days, something that's been really fun in the modern era, but we didn't get as developers in the past, is actually being able to watch everyone play our game via live streams, right? There's just tons of geeking out amongst artists, engineers, quest designers, counter designers, spending months, years making something, and then getting to see people directly play and engage with and be entertained and react and laugh and get excited by the things that you've made. It's why we all do this. It's all about just bringing joy to the world, and being able to see it directly. It's just the most rewarding part of it all. And I responded by saying, Ian Hazzikostas, Santa Claus of the West. I love it. And he said, honestly, it's not a bad gig. When we do our jobs well, we are bringing people happiness. That's the gist of it. So again, honesty, clarity, humanity. It's one of the things that people do forget when you're screaming out on forums or Twitter or wherever else is, there's real people that are involved in all of these processes. And, maybe some people treat other people that poorly in real life. But here, I think we do have to take the time to really pause and reflect about what's going on. And so hearing that the team, after all that they've been through, which is worse, by leaps and bounds, right? We've seen on the fringes what's been going on inside this business. I mean, it's their job, right? That's their everyday lives, and it's this quasi form of, I hate to say entertainment, but it's we're just viewers to this. We can support in certain ways, but for them, it's their life, it's their real life, it's their everyday. And so to hear them also feeling this sense of, like I said, rebirth, renewal, that they are feeling a rejuvenation about this game and us now sort of entering another era for Warcraft, it leaves me feeling really positive about where we're going. To hear how overall they've been able to adapt, that we've got new stuff coming, that they're going to give us the space to breathe, to enjoy the new expansion, to level and to have some fun there. And then maybe something not as huge, but maybe something new is going to come down the pike. and that they're enjoying it and enjoying watching us play it. That's great to hear. And I know this isn't like the most hard-hitting stuff. I know this isn't about like rating or Mythic Plus or, you know, quest rewards and stuff like that. But these are the kinds of questions that I've wanted to ask. These are the things that I've been curious about when I have conversations with people about Warcraft. This is the kind of stuff that people wonder about because it's all behind the curtain. It's hard to know when you get corporate statements, let's say, or public relations statements. Now you have access. This is mainline access to the man. You can ask them these questions and find out where they're at and how they feel. So overall, a very positive note, a very positive tone. And to get that down, I really appreciated hearing about that, and I hope you did too. Now, as we got further into the interview, we, as you can imagine, started running out of time. And so when it got back around to my cycle, quite frankly, there were only a handful of minutes left. But I felt like I got at least a few more good questions in. At least some of them were for myself. Some of them were for the homies. So credit to the homie Slick Rock for this one. I thought this was a really good question. And, maybe it wasn't the most hardcore answer. But something that I think a lot of us, whether you realize it or not, may be curious about. And that question was, and I asked him, how do you benchmark what a success is for the new talent system? I know that's a loaded question. He says, that is a good question. Ha! Another good question. Good job, Slick. It's mostly subjective feedback because I think it's tricky. Often you can look at the raw stats of how many people do something when it comes to content. It's like one thing is what people are telling us. The other piece is, well, how often are they returning to this content, and can that help gauge its overall success? Well, the talent system is something that's forced upon you whether you like it or not. So we can't look at that. We'll certainly be looking at how many people are using different builds and loadouts and how they're switching among them to understand what percentage of players are really going deep into the system. I think we can probably infer from that it's working for them and that they're enjoying the customization or flexibility and the depth that it has. But ultimately, it's really going to be the product of just subjective feedback. We certainly will be looking at the individual talents. That's something that's aside from the framework as a whole and the rules of how the system works. This is a starting point. We're going to continue to iterate on all 38 of these spec trees and on all of these class trees. We're going to look as we get ahead into the later Dragonflight patches and see which of the talents that are very, very unpopular, that almost no one is taking. Let's change something about them. Let's replace them. If there are talents that are so dominant that they stifle choice in the tree, let's do something about that too. So, in that sense, there is data that can guide us there. But so far, it's been really encouraging. It was a scary change to make. It's the underpinnings of the game. Every single person, like it or not, was going to log into a completely transformed class spec experience. That's also part of why we put in this sort of backstop of the default loadout, the starter build. People didn't want to necessarily grapple with the complexity of it up front, or even ever. They could just say, you know what, this isn't the part of the game that I enjoy. I don't like tinkering and min-maxing. I don't want to have to relearn how to play my spec. Just give me something that works, and I'll ignore it. And that's there for you. But the flip side is, hearing from people who are making different builds and loadouts for different bosses, for dungeons versus raids, or just leveling new characters for the first time, and feeling a deeper connection to their class or spec as they spend each individual point as they level, those are all tremendously encouraging and heartening, given our goals with this effort. So one of the things I always say, provide feedback. Constructive criticism if need be, don't be a dick. But here it is, from the man himself. It doesn't sound like they necessarily have some sort of rubric that they're going to follow in terms of how successful this system is. It's going to depend on you, me, everybody, the players, to give them feedback about how well these systems are working. If I'd been able to dive in more in depth on a longer interview, I think there's more questions about, how competitive certain builds should or shouldn't be, those kinds of things. But if what they're looking at is, I think, the cookie cutter loadout, which is what we're going to see a lot of. I even joked about it on the last episode. You go out on Wowhead, there's the cookie cutter thing, and you plug it in, and all right, I'm ready for raid. Or I'm ready for this, or I'm ready for that. I appreciate, and again, the proof is in the pudding, as the man said himself, is that if there's only one viable way to do something and it's intended to have more customization, well, then they're going to have to make some changes. So listening to what he's got to say here, if you have feedback, if things feel broken, just keep telling them. And I know there's some communities out there that are pissed that their specs are broken or things aren't working. And I don't doubt that that is the case, or at least there's some truth to that. Just keep banging away. I don't think he's bullshitting me when he's giving me these answers that they're going to continue to, in his own words, iterate on all 38 of these specs and all of the class trees. And listen to what he says after that about into the later Dragonflight patches. Got to give it some time to play out. And I think that's something that is difficult for us, is patience, because things will go broken for a patch, 2 patches or longer. And that may be the case here, where there are some things that aren't working, aren't aligning, or perhaps are just flat out broken, and it may take a little while to get to them. But keep banging away with that constructive criticism, with that feedback, because that's what they're looking for, and that's how we're going to get, things in a place where we want them. So following up on that, it was the perfect segue into the one question that I've talked about on this show a bunch of times, talked about it with Nav. Maybe you've forgotten about it, but here it is. Following up on that answer, I said, excellent. And speaking of talents, I promised myself I would always ask you this question if I got the chance. It's that in the age of increased customization, if warriors could get a headbutt as an alternate interrupt, it would be fantastic. Just the crown of the head, right across the bridge of the nose. Let me tell you, it'll mess up a spellcaster every time. And he puts his hand on his chin. He goes, I will pass that glyph suggestion along. That would be quite the pummel glyph. I said, it would be glorious. People worldwide would love it. So there you go. I was able to get that headbutt into the conversation. And that's not the end of the headbutt. Let's keep going. I said, any chance that we'll see one-handed weapons being freed up to be able to use for two-handed weapon transmog? This one's for Nav, and this one's for Desmophisto, because I think he's always asking it. And Ian said, not anytime soon. Possible, but not likely. So there's still a lot of really good transmog, one-handed transmog that is locked away. And a single-minded fury ain't enough to make me want to use that transmog, quite frankly. But they'll keep freeing it up, and that's not the end. We got more. Let's keep going. I said, is there anything about Dragonflight that you personally feel most proud of, that is going either unnoticed or underreported, and you feel deserve more attention? And this is where I think maybe the biggest news of all came out of this. The 10.02 patch mention I thought was pretty good, but this is the one that I think should really get people excited. So all of your news sites out there, I don't know why you're not blowing this up. Tally us and Evatel, come on, Tally, blow this up. He says, honestly, I'm sorry this is kind of a cop-out answer, but not really. Y'all are really good at turning over stones and examining every nook and cranny of the stuff we build. And then he kind of took a pause, and then he started smiling, and he says, I will say that there is an unprecedented amount of encrypted narrative content in this expansion that no one has ever seen, and that is going to blow some minds in the weeks to come. There are multiple endgame narrative chapters. There are multiple endgame campaigns that are available at level 70 that just were not available on beta. We have dozens of cutscenes that you'll be seeing. Look forward to all of that. Boom. There's your other big Unshackled Fury. I know that somebody put this in a couple of write-ups, but another exclusive there, where, again, I don't think that this was even hinted at or mentioned anywhere else prior to this interview. Ian tipped the cap there to the fact that there is a whole bunch of stuff that nobody has seen, and I'm glad that he mentioned this, because one of my questions that I did not get to ask was about the prevalence of data mining and what sort of difficulty that might add to their their day-to-day. And it sounds like they're getting around a lot of that now by doing exactly what he's talking about here, which is encrypting these important story beats or chapters or moments or whatever, and looking into what's around the corner, right? We probably have to see the launch of the expansion, let people level up, see some of this encrypted stuff he's talking about, and then that leads us into maybe that 10.02 or further down to the 10.1 or others. So I thought that was a pretty good get. I was pretty excited when he started talking about that, because you know how I feel about data mining on this show. I hate it, and I understand why it's out there, and there's an entire website dedicated to clicks on that, but I think it just robs so many great opportunities for players, because oftentimes there's stuff that's data mined and it's chewed up, spit out, and just completely left in the dustbin by the community by the time it's even live. So to hear this and to hear Ian kind of let that spill out a little bit, I was very excited to hear that. And that was the last question that I had. And so at that point we were actually out of time, but both Hula Hoops and Manny managed to get a couple of last minute questions in, and I wanted to include them because I thought that they were both Hula Hoops' question from Raider.io I thought was really important, and I know this is one that got picked up on as well. And it's something akin to another question that I had that I didn't get to ask. So I'm really glad that she got to sneak this one in. And then Manny from For Azeroth, he had another question that was less impactful, but it's still related to my one most important thing. So I wanted to get both of these in. So here they go. So Hulu's jumped in and said she wanted to just ask one more question. And she kind of phrased it like it was going to be a quick one. But she said, what's one thing you wish the players understood about the development process of World of Warcraft? And he goes, that's not a quick question. And he kind of thought about it for a second. And he says, honestly, like the most inaccurate thing that I see said at times, the most hurtful, is that we don't care, that we're lazy, that sometimes we're whatever. This entire team cares passionately, and we are deeply rewarded by the joy of our players. We want to make everyone happy. If we're unable to act on feedback, often it's because we're balancing the concerns and requests of a very, very diverse player base with different goals, different motivations, and often directly conflicting desires. We're doing that thing that person A requests would make the game worse for person B, and vice versa, because they play the game in a different way and want to experience the game in different ways, and that feedback is super valid. People should absolutely advocate for their personal playstyle. If you are someone who likes running dungeons and doesn't have time for raiding, you should advocate, and are justified in doing so, that we cater to your playstyle, that we transform the game in ways that elevate the things that you like over the things that you don't like. But also recognize there are counterparts and there are counterpoints, and people who are advocating for and asking for the exact same things from the other directions. And so we're trying to balance all of that. Sometimes it's impossible to do both. Sometimes we just make mistakes. But understand that the mistakes are always coming from a place of positive intentions and wanting to maximize the happiness, maximize the quality of everyone's time they spend in World of Warcraft. If we get it wrong, please be patient. Let us know, and we will do our best to fix it. But it all comes from a place of earnest, good intent. Again, I have made no secret about my feelings about Ian Hazzikostas. I think he is one of us. I know he came from elitist jerks back in the day, but you know what? That was a while ago. And I think we have to, at a certain point, allow for people to grow and allow for people to become who they're supposed to be. And when I hear answers like this and the others that I've read already, and when I can look at him on a screen answering these questions live in front of me, I genuinely believe him when he talks about sort of the hurt that they feel by the things that people say, the misunderstandings that go on, and how they are doing their absolute damnedest to bring us the best possible experience that they can. The pressures that they're under, I can't understand. I can't. I don't know what that's like. I have no frame of reference for that. To have to cater to and balance the demands of literally millions of people who play this game. You can't even get 100 people in a room to agree on much these days, it feels like. So to create something that caters to literally millions of players, it is just a balancing act that I don't even know how anyone can pull off. And so to hear him talk about that, I think once again it reinforces that provide that feedback, provide that constructive criticism. Don't be a dick about it. Just don't. It's not good for anyone. It doesn't serve any purpose here. And try to remember again that there are humans. There are real people that are working day and night, long hours, are pouring themselves out to create these places and things that we experience and go to. So I thought that was a great question, and it was awesome to hear that. And the very last question, very last thing that was even said on this interview, Manny, before Azeroth, sneaking it in, and he goes, he tried to sneak in the one last question. He's like, I really gotta go. It's like, no, this is just a quick one here. Let me ask. Is that okay? And so Manny asked, are there any plans to introduce new glyphs, customizations for spells that we haven't seen yet? And he goes, nothing to announce at this time, which was kind of the joke, because Manny said, I'm going to ask this even if that's the answer. And he says, nothing to announce at this time. But yes, that's an area we want to continue to expand. I think the focus with everything professions-wise right now for Dragonflight has been the new profession system and its underpinnings. But cosmetic, customization of abilities is something we know everyone loves, like a pummel glyph that turns into a headbutt. And he goes, no promises. And I just said, my man, my man. I was pretty happy to hear that. And that was the end of our interview. That was the end of the questions that we had to ask. He had to run, and literally within seconds, he's like, I thank you. I really have to go. And out he went. So that was my portion of the interview. And those were a couple of extra questions. But all in all, an amazing experience. He was very gracious with his time, and I believe that he gave us as complete and as honest answers as he could give. Now, coming out of this, right, we have to get this information out. Raider.io, they have their own machine over there, so they were able to get this sort of up first. They covered, I think, all of their questions, a few of mine, and a few of Manny's. So in that article, which also then subsequently got picked up by Wowhead, there's a good chunk of what was asked, but that wasn't everything. Bonus roll, we have a transcript that's up, and Manny busted his ass to get something up there, and it covers most of what was there. The last question that he asked there wasn't included, and I thought that was fun because, frankly, Ian's just plugging my headbutt pummel glyph. It's pretty close, but it's not all the way there when it comes to my stuff. So then Manny and I know Manny and Liv talked about it on For Azeroth, and that episode has been up. And so I'm sort of the last car on this train, and those are my questions and the answers that I received near verbatim to how this went down. So overall, an amazing experience. Getting to interview Ian Hazzikostas is pretty high on my list of things that I hoped to accomplish by doing this podcast. When I look at, what is the mountaintop? What is the ultimate goal? What is something that I feel like couldn't be topped? Getting to be part of a group interview, it's pretty big. Getting him alone, an hour's worth of interview time, him, Danuzer, Taryn Gregory, those are kind of the top ones that if I can actually have like a sit down, like a real sit down interview with, that would be very difficult to beat. If they ever had some kind of a Q&A at BlizzCon that I could somehow, I don't know, make sure nobody else was available for and I could do. That might be it. That might be the top. That might be the top of the mountain. But this is pretty close. And so I'm really grateful to Bonus Roll and for Blizzard and to Blizzard for hooking me up on that and giving me the chance to talk about them or talk with them about these questions that I had. And so coming out of this, it's kind of funny to see what the content creation cycle looks like when it comes to something like this. And as I talked about in the last episode in relation specifically to Preach and then sort of my own experience about how the content creation cycle can eat you up. It really can if you're not careful. And so this is a good example of that, where we had this interview, and by my accounts, I thought we had some pretty good pieces of news that came out of this. Quite frankly, the stuff about, the rating, which I raid, but the questions about the rating and the Mythic Plus and all that stuff, not my jam. I hope that the folks that are into that heard some things that they wanted to hear. But coming out of that, to me, it was the nod to 1002, and it was the stuff about the encrypted level 70 stuff that hasn't been seen. Those are kind of the two big things to me. And so I was like, all right, let's see, what comes out of that. Raider.io included, I think, the encrypted stuff in their write-up. Wowhead picked up that one, and apparently we're all partners. Even though it's Raider.io's thing, it was like us partnering with them, Unshackled Fury and For Azeroth. So it was kind of funny to see things sort of labeled that way. We got our own stuff up with Bonus Roll. I don't know that anybody has picked that up, because by the time that came out, Wowhead had already had like 5 other interviews that came out. And so the one that we had just done and the stuff that we had just put out, it's already buried, right? It's already buried. If Wowhead is sort of the central hub of Warcraft news, right? That stuff has already been buried. MMO Champion, I don't think ever picked it up. They had their own interview going on, right? So as far as like the other outlets that would have picked these things up, it's already gone. It's already done. By the time you hear this, so this will be Monday, the 21st, by the time you hear this, I hope you, my dear listener, are enjoying, the questions that I had and all that kind of stuff and whatever news that we discovered. But people have already moved on. This interview is old news by the time you hear this, right? And so if you aren't careful, right, that can eat you up, because there was a push to get this stuff out as soon as possible. Let me tell you, as soon as that interview was done, people were jamming, getting write-ups done and fact-checking and checking stuff and getting your graphics and checking your handles and Twitter stuff and all these things, right? It's just boom, 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 boom. Granted, not my pace. I'm on my own schedule. I'm going to do my own thing. But it was really interesting to see how then that cycle of the news happened, and how, once again, you kind of have to be careful when you're in it, how you treat those things. But back to the baseline here. Very thankful. I had an amazing time talking with Ian. I only got a handful of questions in, but getting to ask the question I've always wanted, plus a few more that I thought were really important, that was an amazing experience, and I'm very thankful for it. I'm prepared for it to never happen again, because I don't expect these kinds of things. I would hope that they would ask me back if appropriate at a later time. But it was an amazing experience to have, and I'm proud to bring that to you and kind of bring you along as best I can. Even though it wasn't a replay of audio or video, I hope my retelling of it at least kind of gave you an idea of what happened when I had Ian speak, but through me. Now, moving on. Phase 2 of the Dragonflight pre-patch has occurred. Back on the 15th, Phase 2 hit. We got all the new Drakthir Evoker stuff we've been talking about. We had a new dungeon. The Primal Storms are happening. All that stuff. So, jump in. I actually waited to make my Drakthir for a little bit, figuring that there'd be some kind of a rush on that. So I ran out on Berzerker, got some quests, talked to Rathian, saw some of the cutscenes there, understanding, all right, we got an invitation to go to the Dragon Isles, but these storms are happening, so we got to deal with that first, and we had to recruit some people to go with us. We'll see them later. Let the Drakthir know what's going on. And then off we are, fighting Primal Storms and getting essences and doing all that kind of stuff. So started the day doing that, and then later in the night, finally made my Drakthir Evoker. Unsurprisingly, he's about as metal as I could have made him. Lots of black and silver tones. And started running through the Forbidden Reach. Playing through that story. I played through a good chunk of it on the beta, but this was the first time, obviously, seeing it live. And I don't know that I will ever do more than just sort of tinker around with it, because just spellcasting is not my jam. But again, like the Death Knight when they created that hero class, what a wonderful kit to play around with. even just the flying aspects of it, right? Just soaring around. It was pretty badass. And they've got some, deep breath and some other great abilities where it really makes you feel like a dragon. You feel like you are dragon kind and you're running around and you're lighting stuff up, having to do some of the healing things. Okay, healing. I would definitely be DPS if I had to pick one. I haven't quite finished it yet. I need to finish the zone. But so far, the customization, again, is insane. It's a fun zone. It's a great introduction to the Dragon Isles and the history of the Drakthir and sort of their confused awakening and what they're learning. And it's very sad when they're like, oh, Notharian will tell us what's going on. Oh, no, they won't. Oh, no, he won't. New dungeon, Uldaman. We find out that, Odin lied to us. Or at least Odin had other people lie to us. And they've completely bamboozled us in terms of what the Black Empire really was. What we've been told, right? Old gods came, established the Black Empire, everything was bad. Well, now we find this book when we're in Uldaman, and it's an edict from Odin saying, yeah, we're just going to bamboozle everybody and make sure that when they hear about the Black Empire, that everything was bad, that any of their advancements, we're not going to give them any credit. So, long story short on this, it feels like they are soft retconning the Black Empire for use in a future expansion or future material. Is this another not old god expansion? There's a lot of old goddy stuff going on. Is this setting up for the light versus void future? I don't know. In that dungeon also, we're going for the the discs of Norganon, or the backup material that's in there to try to re-empower the aspects. That's something that's a through line here, is that we're trying to re-empower the aspects, and this item is destroyed, so now we're gonna have to figure it out another way, which is fine. We already knew we were gonna have to go do that in the Dragon Isles. The Primal Storms, they're a thing. They're a thing. Is it terribly exciting? No. But holy shit, is it good for leveling your alts, because let me tell you, I don't even think took 2.5 hours to get my DK to max level. And that's from 50 to 60. So I am finally leveling my alts. I said I would do it, and here I am. I did it yesterday. Grabbed up the DK, and as long as you tag the elites, they're sharing them cross-faction. So as long as you tag the elites, you're golden. And you can do the quests. Quests are a great XP boost. The way in which they have reduced the amount of XP you need between levels, it's insane. It's just... It's comical at this point. It's not even really a challenge. You can go down and just keep running around and tagging stuff. That's all I was doing. It's just using AoE effects and just running from mob to mob to mob to mob to mob. Yeah, I got killed a couple times, but for the most part, I'm just watching that XP bar just chugging along. It's like an assembly line, just filling up. So I am here to tell you, as a person who never levels his alts, if you need to quickly level your alt, the Primal Storms are the way to go. Just do it. Hook it up, run through there, just tag stuff, let everybody else kill it, stay out of the big battles if you need to. It is fantastic. So, off and running on phase 2, having fun so far with, getting the alts leveled and collecting some gear. I've got my full night-looking plate set. I've got all the stuff that Berzerker needs, so now it's just getting these alts up to level, and I'll continue doing that. I want to shout out and thank Navox, Ali, and Demiranoff for their streams, because they helped me get my kite pet, my dragon kite pet, that was subject of the Twitch drama that I talked about last time with these Twitch drops that we're doing. That is the one that's going on right now. The Feldrake will come at launch. So I want to thank you three for having me and putting up with my nonsense in chat. Because that's pretty much all I do, is I'll just show up in people's chat randomly and just start yelling stuff. And God bless all of you who realize it's me when I'm doing it and humor me for it. So I did get the pet. I'm a complete sucker. I said I would do it, even if I didn't like it. But here I am doing it. We also had, a little bit before that, the third chapter of the Dragonflight Legacies cinematic drop. And it focuses mostly on Neltharion's fall. And now at this point we had clarity that these legacies, it wasn't about any, I was curious about this before, you know, were we going to get one per flight or something like that? No, this was just a class introduction for the most part. But it focused this time in Chapter 3 about why did Neltharion fall? Why did Deathwing come to be? And the short answer is that when Razagath and the Primalists came in to attack them, Neltharion was controlling the Drakthir with this Titan artifact glove. It basically looked like he had the Infinity Gauntlet. And that was what he was using to control the Drakthir. It was destroyed, and in his desperation, he turned to the old gods who gave him the power to defeat Razagath and the Primalists. And then from that point on, shit went sideways. And so that was one of the big mysteries for this whole series, and for Nosdormu in particular, was how is it that Neltharion was corrupted? That was something that had always been kept from him, or he was blind to that fact. And so this was where now Nosdormu sees that this was how the Drakthir were controlled, and this is how Neltharion fell. In my mind, is that a new legendary? That Titan artifact? Is that something that we're going to reconstruct later? Maybe. We also found out that Neltharion essentially saw the Drakthir as a risk once he couldn't control them, and had Malygos put a spell on them that made them dormant for the last 20,000 years. And looking over all three of these chapters, and thinking back to what I said earlier about Oldemon, and how one of the through lines here is we're trying to re-empower the aspects, it feels like we're getting a lesson in it's not a good thing for the aspects to be empowered because they get corrupted and then shit goes sideways. It feels like Nosdormu may even be manipulating here in a certain way by saying, "Oh, you know, you have a place, you know, you have a place to go and you have a purpose here and all this and that." But really what he was trying to find out was this: how did Neltharion get his power? Why does Nosdormu need to know? Right? Why is that so important to him? It's interesting. To me, anyway. And maybe this is the Murazon factor. I don't know. But I don't know that re-empowering the aspects is a good idea. Maybe it turns out to be fine. Maybe it's not a big deal. But it feels like all of this is a giant warning that we should not be doing this. So we need to be careful. But we'll see as we play. And speaking of cinematics, going back to what I mentioned earlier in my question with Ian about the stream that was had where they released the sort of launch cinematic for Dragonflight. It's one of these pre-rendered full CGI beauties. My God. Incredible. I mean, they knock it out of the park every time, but seeing the Wildhammer dwarf, awesome. Right? The dragon riding, the way that was sort of interpreted, amazing. The way in which they show the Drakthir manipulating their energy and their power, that chromatic effect, right? That rainbow effect. That was some of the coolest stuff they've ever done in any cinematic ever. It's not story necessarily. It's not a long one. It's only a couple minutes. But just powerful, man. Just powerful to see all of that happening. Alex Straza, right, pulling them alongside and seeing the awe-inspired face of our dwarven friend, to see her rising up through the clouds. Again, going back to what Ian talked about with this sense of awe and exploration and wonder, right? I think it's hard. It's hard sometimes because we live in such a cynical fucking world where we don't trust anybody. It's hard to believe what you see and hear nowadays. There's so much that's gone sideways. And so, especially with something like Warcraft, which as a franchise has a complicated history, it's hard to take things at face value. It's hard to believe what you're seeing. Like, is this really what I want it to be? This light, uplifting ode to Warcraft, all the things that make it good. Because I want that. I think most people want that. You want to connect with this, what we often call a third place, right? It's not home, it's not work, it's not the bar, the coffee shop. For a lot of us, it's Warcraft. That third place where you connect with people, right? You want that to be that warm, fuzzy, ooey gooey feeling of like, I belong here. I want to be here. There's fun times to be had here. There's comfort here. And because we live in a world where sometimes that's devalued, I think, or you're led to believe one thing, but it's totally something different. It's hard to buy into that. And there is a certain trepidatiousness about entering into this era of Warcraft, but I'm going to try to keep as open mind as I can. That if their intent is for it to be open, exploratory, wide-eyed wonder, I'm going to try to do that as best I can. And I think we owe it to ourselves as we enter this third age that we do the same. That's not to say that we can't be critical. That's not to say that we can't say what's on our mind when things are going sideways. But let's give it a chance. Let's give the team a chance to show us all of the great things that they're trying to give us. To be that wide-eyed dwarf looking at this and going, oh shit, this is amazing. And so next week, 11/28, Dragonflight. It's finally going to launch. 3 p.m. Pacific time. I will be on. I will be ready. I blocked off my afternoon to see this with my own two eyes. To be there with my homie Rommel. We're going to rip it up. Have some fun. I hope you do too. So level up those alts. Get those last preparations ready. Because it is time. All right. That will do it for this episode. My thanks to all of you for listening. And remember, you can always follow me and this show on Twitter at Berzerker Rage and Unshackled_Fury, at least for now. You can also join our Discord, links for which are in the profile of the show on Twitter and on our bonus roll page. Feel free to contact the show with your questions, comments, or otherwise through any of those resources or unshackedfury.com. And you can find this show wherever you get your podcasts. So once again, thank you for listening. Remember to keep your swords wet and your banners high. And we'll see you in Dragonflight. Farewell.